So check it out, bros. I think Larry Fink is a business development genius for Bitcoin. And I'm really surprised that it took me so long to realize this because it's really only dawning on me now. In the same way that Michael Saylor is actually a genius for being a developer, a tech developer, converting basically MicroStrategies into a Bitcoin development company. I think that Larry Fink is actually a genius for being the business developer for Bitcoin and kind of getting ahead of it on the business side. And I'm going to tell you guys why. I was listening to the Lex Fridman podcast yesterday, and Bill Ackman was his latest guest. Bill Ackman is the CEO of Pershing Square Capital Management, and he's invested. His company's invested in companies like Chipotle, right, and Universal Music Group, some of the biggest and most successful companies in the world. And I want you to take a look and take a listen at this clip. And the smartest among you will probably know kind of where this episode's going, but I will also kind of break it all down and show you guys exactly what I mean by saying that Larry Fink is a business development genius for Bitcoin. Let's take a look. Let's take a listen.
And actually, the music business peaked the last time in like the late 90s or 2000 timeframe. And that really innovation, Napster, digitization of music almost killed the industry. And Universal really led an effort to save the industry and actually made an early deal with Spotify that enabled, the industry to really recover. And so by virtue of their market position and their credibility and their willingness to kind of adopt new technologies, they've kept their position. Now, they, of course, had this huge advantage because I think the Beatles are forever. I think U2 is forever. I think the Rolling Stones are forever. So they had a nice base of assets that were important. And
so what's important here is that just like music is forever, and it's a fundamental part of being human, money is forever. Money's not going anywhere. The concept of a means of exchange, the concept of a store of value is not going anywhere. But the actual form, and especially the form that engages and interacts with human beings and facilitates the transactions between human beings, that concept will evolve, right? The underlying principle of money is necessary. It's not going anywhere, but the actual method and what it is evolves, as we've seen with Bitcoin. This shouldn't be a huge leap for you all to understand kind of where I'm coming from with this. So what Bill Ackman is describing here is Spotify saw the opportunity that the music industry was basically at risk of going to zero because websites like Napster and LimeWire and others were able to say, hey, anybody who has a file of a Beatles song can just upload that file to the internet, to LimeWire, to Napster, and then that file can be listenable to anyone in the world at any time, right? And that technology, it basically brought the music industry to their knees. These billion-dollar companies, right? These companies right here were shaking in their boots. These are the big three record label groups and their affiliated labels, Warner Music Group, Sony Music, Universal Music Group. This is the one that Bill Ackman is most involved in, and if you're into music, you probably recognize some of these names here. What's important is that all of these companies, all of the people that work for these companies, both the admin, the marketing, right, the salespeople, not to mention the artists and the editors. We're talking about potentially millions of people employed, and then millions more employed by the music touring industry. All these people's heads were going to roll because of Napster, right? Well, Spotify came along and they said, not so fast, except they said it in, I think it's Swedish. So, a small group of very talented and smart Swedish folks said, hey, let's make a startup company where we go to the biggest record labels and we say, hey, license through us and we'll make streaming music just as easy as it is through Napster or through downloading music through LimeWire or another one, Pirate Bay, one of these types of things. Okay, so by now you're and that ultimately saved the industry because then Spotify said, here's $12 a month, $9 a month with ads, whatever it's going to be. The consumer won, right? Because the consumers were winning when Napster was providing them free music. They were ultimately winning, but they were losing in the long run because artists weren't going to be incentivized to make any more music into the future. If I'm Taylor Swift, right, but my music can just be stolen and then put on Pirate Bay, I'm not going to make any more music, and therefore the consumer loses, right? Now, there could have been some other evolution in music, of course, who knows, right? But staying with what actually happened, Spotify essentially saved the music industry. At least they were the first to the table and got these big guys at the table. And I believe it, the way that Bill Ackman describes it in this podcast with Lex Friedman, it was really Universal that really brought Spotify to the table. They came to the table and said, "Hey, we got to get a deal here. We got to make something happen. There's going to have to be compromises, or else the entire music industry is going to have its incentives completely pulled out from under it." And we don't know if we're going to be able to pay our musicians. What does this even mean for music? Right? So I think you're starting to see kind of where this is going here. Ultimately, in the music industry, the consumer won because they got that streaming service for only $13.99. And so now, whatever the price is where you live, it's probably different in the US than it is in the EU and around the world, right? But for a relatively small amount of money, I can listen to Mozart, I can listen to the Beatles, and I can listen to Taylor Swift and Drake, right? From the convenience of my smartphone, from the convenience of my desktop. And Spotify is great, right? Is kind of the point here. It was a good solution for artists, for the user, and for the big corporations that were running it from the beginning. So how does this tie back into Larry Fink? Well, so here's what I think is going on here. The banking industry owns these music labels, right? They have a large share and they have a large interest because these guys know something that has been known for a long time. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll are going to be very, very important and durable industries, right? And by that we can assume music is kind of the rock and roll there. People are going to consume music into the future as in the same way they have in the past. It's as certain as people are going to value gold, right? People are going to want to listen to music. They're going to want to have that experience, and that's not going anywhere, right? And some people are going to be able to make music that people want to listen to, and they're going to be able to sell it. Well, in the same way, Larry Fink knows that people are going to need money, right? People are going to need stable money. They're going to need money that can't be printed. And so what Larry Fink here is doing is he's saying, the banking industry just learned a very big lesson about what the internet can do to an entire industry. Okay, you see where this is going here? And so what I think is happening here is that Spotify here has taught Larry Fink a lesson, and Larry Fink is leading a charge on Wall Street, to be able to enable Bitcoin to become integrated into the world economy to save the world economy. Now, is he doing it alone? Obviously not. Was he the initiator of the idea? There's no way I can know that. But if you kind of listen to what Bill Ackman was saying in this podcast with Lex Friedman, it's very clear to me that what Larry Fink is doing is he's trying to get ahead of the Napsters, get ahead of the LimeWires and the Pirate Bays that ultimately, almost killed the music industry. He's trying to get ahead of that over in the money industry and say, before the, money becomes completely decentralized and governments completely lose power, banks completely lose power, let's go ahead and wrap an ETF around the winning currency, Bitcoin, and let's go ahead and say that this is going to be the Spotify equivalent for the money industry. Now users, if they want to buy Bitcoin, they can buy it through us. If they want to buy Ethereum here in a couple of months, they can buy it through us. If they want to engage in crypto, they can do it safely. They don't have to get viruses on their computer from downloading from Pirate Bay. They can do it all through an ETF, and they can do it all on Wall Street, just like their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents did before them. Now you're probably thinking, but T-Shroom, this opens up a lot of questions. This asks a lot more questions than it answers. It does. But I do think that this specific kind of epiphany, to me, I doubt that I'm the first one to have it, but it really was revealed through this Bill Ackman podcast, and I wanted to share it with you all. And I want to see kind of what folks are thinking here. Let me know in the comments what you think. Now, I know that Larry Fink has a bit of a stigma because he's part of the World Economic Forum, because he's kind of this this man of great stature in a kind of the shadowy industry of banking. But let's take our tinfoil hats off for a moment and just kind of look at the world for what it really is, right? It's people, it's money, and it's interests. People want resources, they want money, and their interests are going to lead them there, right? And their incentives are going to lead them there. So ultimately, I think what is happening here is Larry Fink, really, his incentive is to save the money industry, save the establishment, right? And hopefully the good parts of the establishment, not the bad, right? And we'll see. Because ultimately, what Bitcoin is it's money online, just like music became online and it started to go into disaster territory for artists and for the industry. Bitcoin is coming online, and the banks, right, and the bond traders and the global governments are saying, oh, this Bitcoin is now at all-time highs compared to our currency, not the US dollar, but it's at all-time highs compared to 14 currencies internationally. The fiat system, just in the same way, right? The fiat system is in the same phase that the music industry was in. I don't know what year it was, but when Napster and LimeWire and Pirate Bay were all coming to rise. Music, these guys were shaking in their boots looking at LimeWire, saying, we can't take this website down. We don't own it. We can't get the U.S. government to do it because they don't understand it, right? They were like, we are going to die. We have to do something. And they went to Spotify, and eventually Apple Music and Amazon Music and all of the rest. The rest is history. There's obviously going to be competition. But right now, the fiat world, right, the lira, the yen, right, the peso is looking at the Bitcoin and they're saying the jig is up. Our time is over. The dollar is unique because it's the world reserve currency. It has the petrodollar connection, it has the euro dollar connection, and it is backed by the US military and the US government's ability to pay back bonds. But for how much longer? How much longer until Taylor Swift can't sing anymore? Taylor Swift doesn't have that incentive to sing anymore, till people are not incentivized to go to banks and withdraw dollars. Instead, they go to banks, put in dollars, and then transfer those dollars to Coinbase. Right? How much longer until the masses do this? Now, I think probably with what Larry Fink did here, it's not going to happen that way. Right? It's because even when at the peak of Pirate Bay, at the peak of LimeWire and Napster, there was a large group of people who were not using those services at all. They were still going to Walmart, buying CDs, and procuring music in traditional methods, right? And those people are the same type of people who have not yet adopted crypto, right? Because they don't know what's good for them, right? Or they're fed lies, they're fed propaganda by corporate marketing teams that are very, very good at what they do. So, it's not a good or a bad thing. That's just the way that human incentives have led us to this moment. Right. So ultimately what we have to do is take a step back and say, what should we do about this? Is there anything we can or should do about this? And the conclusion that I come to is hodl Bitcoin, right? Hodl Bitcoin indeed. Now, usually on this 9 a.m. stream, I will have talked about the price of crypto assets. I will have talked about some news and headlines that is kind of influencing the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum. But perhaps you're watching this video because you're interested in topics such as the World Economic Forum or Larry Fink being smart, or just Bitcoin. You want to learn a little bit more about it. Well, you have absolutely found one of the best channels that covers crypto news, crypto price action, and I care a lot about Bitcoin and the future of money and the future of humanity. I believe will grow and become thrivers through a currency that is returning to the world. In its origin, it was just truth and honesty, and now it is manifested through the internet as Bitcoin. Truth and honesty. Here we are in 2024, and the price of truth and honesty is just around $51,000 per coin, $51,000 per unit of trust and honesty. Let's take a look at it here, folks. This is the price of Bitcoin. This may be the first time you're ever looking at a Bitcoin price chart. It looks complicated. It looks scary. There's a lot of colors. Well, just bear with me, folks. See, what's happening right now is the Bitcoin has gone through a period of quite rapid ascension. It's gone up and it's tested levels that it hasn't been before in 2024, and it has stopped short of a major milestone, which is 53%. But the buyers aren't losing faith. And the buyers are enabling Bitcoin to stay above the price of $50,000 per coin, right? This was a big psychological level that Bitcoin wasn't above just a few weeks ago. February 12th, Bitcoin was only trading down here at $48,000. It hadn't been higher than that in 2024. Now, that has changed, and Bitcoin has not only gone higher than that, but it's also tested $53,000 printed up there on the lower time frames, but has not been able to get above it, which is important because now the question is, how low do we go before Bitcoin gets a second chance to go up there and test that level and print above it? So this is the kind of things that we do here on this channel. We take a look at the prices. Now let's take a look at some of the news that is affecting Bitcoin and affecting economies around the world. This is a major headline that I care about. Javier Milei achieves first budget surplus in Argentina in over 12 years. This is crazy, guys. The libertarian dream is alive and well down in Argentina, and it looks like it's right on schedule. President Javier Milei, Argentina, just achieved its first budget surplus in 12 years, boasting a 256.9 increase in tax revenue and 50% drop in public spending in January 2024. It's almost like balancing a budget isn't that hard. You just have to take in more money than you spend. That is insane that they did it in so quickly. We'll see how sustainable that is. We'll see what breaks. There's definitely going to be some things that probably have to break. I don't know if they've completely closed down the central bank. That's one thing that Javier Milei absolutely wants to do. Well, going across the pond, and then a little bit north, we see a headline here from England's Law Commission seeks views on draft legislation to label crypto as property. Now, this is pretty cool. Not going to get into the details of this very much, but an important date coming up for this is responses are required by March 22nd. So we've seen this in some other countries. Actually, China was one of them. Interestingly enough, their judicial branch actually ruled that crypto can be viewed as property. So that's an interesting development over there for England. Moving along here, spot Ether ETFs could introduce new concentration risk in Ethereum. S&P Global is sounding the alarm. This is an interesting thought, an interesting concept. We will probably dive more into this in the 3 p.m. live stream that we do here in our coverage of crypto asset prices and news. But let's keep going because the biggest headline is right here, and it's very, very interesting. This one comes from us through Twitter, formerly X. Eric Wilconis, you got the joke. The European Central Bank woke up and chose violence. I love that. Says Bitcoin has failed on its promise. Its fair value is still zero. Causes environmental damage and is a market for snake oil salesmen. Says ETF Rally. Says ETF Rally is just a dead cat bounce. And then, there's a link to the post here. So doesn't the European Bank sound a little bit like these guys here, shaking in their boots, a little scared of what this new technology is doing to their industry of fiat? It definitely sounds pretty accurate to me. Do I feel bad for them? No, I don't, because I think that these world governments, right, the EU, the U.S. government, the Japanese central bank, certainly the Chinese, the CCP, these folks have been running systems that ultimately they disproportionately benefit the elite. They disproportionately do not help the people. Now, am I saying that you could create a system that does something better? I do think that you can, right? But I understand that systems on Earth do tend to default towards centralization and disproportionately benefiting the elite. I get that. I'm not ignorant to that. I get it. With crypto and with Bitcoin, it makes sense that you would want to throw a little mud at it every once in a while to help folks who are invested in your fiat, invested in your bonds, continue to be incentivized to do that. And there's no better way than to say that Bitcoin has failed. Bitcoin has failed on its promise. Now, this is an interesting theme that we've been seeing more and more in the mainstream financial media ever since Gary Gensler went on CNBC a couple of weeks ago, and instead of saying, this is why I voted against, or this is why, some of the members of the SEC voted against the passage, the approval of the spot Bitcoin ETF, and going into like minutia, he resorted to a very old argument against Bitcoin, which is that it has no intrinsic value, right? And what I'll say is that this is an argument that I hear from boomers quite a bit. folks who are a little older than me, or folks I've heard also in Mexico. There's a lot of folks in Mexico who believe this argument as well. There's a lot of people around the world who believe this argument. I counted myself among them pre-2020, right, before I really understood Bitcoin. But they say, Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value, and it really doesn't provide anything to the world. Well, of course, if you know anything about Bitcoin, you know that that's patently false. But what's more important and more interesting to me in this moment is that this is the argument that's being trotted out. Because what I think is going on here is that the global financial elite, they're resetting the conversation, because the conversation was getting too far to, what about El Salvador, right? And the big wins, and how Bitcoin is actually flipping as much as 14 fiat currencies right now, right? So what the global financial elite are trying to do is they're trying to take the conversation back to make it look like Bitcoin is actually fundamentally under question, right? And when you do that, then it takes the energy, it takes the focus away from the true conversation and the edge conversation that Bitcoin is actually winning. It's winning hearts and minds. And the biggest heart and mind that has mattered recently is that it's won the heart and mind of Wall Street. I mean, if you look at the levels of demand flowing into the Bitcoin ETF, it is unprecedented, right? When the gold ETFs first came out, the level of money that flowed into the ETFs pales in comparison to the amount that is flowing into the Bitcoin ETFs. When you look at the initiation of the S&P ETFs that have not always been around, you have the same exact dynamic. So it's not a surprise to me that the European Central Bank woke up and chose violence, because they should. Their butts are on fire. They are having to move. They are having to act, because the next thing they know is the Pirate Bays and the LimeWires and the Napsters are going to be putting them out of work, right? These cryptocurrencies do everything that central banks can do, except they do them better. And Bitcoin certainly does. And then you have thousands of altcoins that are essentially competing to be better money and better exchanges of value. And of course, one of these altcoins are going to do very, very well. And then a few will also do pretty darn well. But Bitcoin is a little different. Bitcoin has already proven itself, and it already has enemies in some of the highest places of the world who are very afraid of it and have to resort to old, tired arguments that have been disproven again and again and again through the various cycles of Bitcoin's life. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in to this live stream. It's a live stream, right? It feels like a video. But I do want to thank you for tuning in. And again, if you're watching this for the very first time, I'm T Shroom. I have a partner, Tim. And I'll tell you, if you continue to watch our channel, which I absolutely welcome you to, you'll be seeing a lot more charts. You'll be learning a lot more about how to read charts. We don't just talk about crypto. Sometimes we'll talk about news stories like NVIDIA. Look at this. Now, you might be saying, oh, no, it's going down. It is. But this line up here is actually an indication of how much it's trading in pre-market. So the markets in New York are not yet open here as the recording of this video, but the pre-market is up 11.2% because NVIDIA, right, a corporation, not a crypto project, just did phenomenally on its earnings. I think it was exceeded by $2 billion, its revenue. So there's a lot there to be excited about. For those of you who are investing bros, you're probably wondering, like, what the heck, T-Shroom? It seems like you're not even talking to us. I get it. I feel that. I understand. The reality is there's not a ton of news today outside of that NVIDIA story. So I wanted to kind of share with you all this observation that really spawned from this interesting interview with Bill Ackman. And you can go ahead and go into the Discord and go to the News Wire section of our Discord, and you can listen to that podcast, or you can just search up on YouTube, Bill Ackman, Lex Friedman, and I'm sure you'll get a pretty quick result. But if you want to learn more about the Investing Bros, if you want to go deeper, we have a Discord, and we also have a Twitter account, and you can find the links to all of that here in the description of this very video. All you have to do is just scroll down, and you can see what is going on. You can see the links, and we have links to all of our sponsors and our affiliates, and then you can find all the links to our Twitter here to hear more from us. And we've got a TikTok coming soon. We have an Investing Bros Instagram that's up and running, and we have a lot more coming in the future. We're all very, very excited, and we thank you so much for tuning in. Investing Bros, we'll see you guys at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But remember to stay hydrated, and if you're trading, to keep your stop losses tight. And I will see you at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Adios.
Trying to make paper, turn that better to cake. Money like Lego, connect the dots, stack bank. We are investing bros. We are investing bros. Army pipe, lethal on trade. Entries and exits, worthy of praise. Tim, the professor, the TA. Shout it out loud on the PA. T-Shrooms News got the word. Doing better than what he deserves. Beamer, leave no evidence. Soon fly coop with his dividend. Trying to make paper, turn that better to cake. Money like Lego, connect the dots, stack bank. We are investing bros. We are investing bros.